I just love water. Cannot get enough water. Good evening, guys. It's Joe coming back at you. A little training update with how things have been going for me during nationals, for this nationals prep. Um, Everything's going good. Just been busy. I haven't given you guys an update on how things have been going with me, at least on the YouTube sector of the universe. So recently I qualified for USS Nationals, United States Strongman Nationals, which is going to be on June the 27th in Indianapolis. I qualified for Nationals on the April 18th competition that I won. A few of you know about it. I don't update my YouTube that often. I just watch a bunch of videos, and sometimes I talk a bit of BS in YouTube comments. Who hasn't, yeah, since then, I've just been focusing on this upcoming prep. Started a fundraiser to gather up some funds or aid in that. If you guys who don't have access to my Facebook page wanted to contribute to that, that's totally fine. I'll put the link in the description box. Take a look at that, see how it's going. I'm also going to update that campaign page with a few training videos, mostly videos from the past. I don't always like filming or putting out too much training leading up, but I think for this prep, since it's nationals, it's a bigger deal, I think I'll go a bit in depth with what I've been doing with training. And this video is going to contain and outline a lot of what I've been doing leading up. I want you to take some things from this. For sure, I won't give you the full training cycle that I've been doing for nationals because, one, I don't think there's a need for me to go over every single day of training that I've had specifically since I started prepping specifically for nationals. And two, I don't even have the entire cycle written out yet. I'm still writing up a few workouts for this week. I've actually kind of gone a bit ahead in programming, focusing more on programming event training specifics that I'm going to do in the future to make sure that I peak for certain events or that I have time to build up for certain events. Then I can allow myself to start peaking in that week of travel up to Indianapolis. Again, I feel that programming for strongman events is going to be a bit more of a delicate process than programming for a powerlifting event, or mainly because you're not obviously the events, the sports are still, while they're pretty much similar, they're still very different because you have more components of fitness to account for in strongman, and the objects and implements that you're using, you may not be able to get your hands on the specific implements until the day of the show. And what I mean by that is that you may train with a certain frame, or you may not even be training with the frame leading up to a particular competition. At nationals, we have a frame carry that we have to perform with 610 pounds. But if you don't have access to a frame, you obviously can't train for the frame carry specifically. And even if you did, if you had that particular implement, the width could be a bit different, the handles could be a bit higher, they could be a bit lower. You may get lucky and everything may be the same. So when it comes to specific event prep, obviously the people who train close to Indianapolis, close to the facility that's going to be supplying the equipment, the particular equipment for this competition, those people are going to have the best advantage because they're going to have specificity on their side, exact specificity. And when I trained in my home gym where I started training strongman events, and we would hold shows, whether it was close to my hometown or whether it was a little bit of ways with an affiliate, I had the advantage of specificity because I was training with a lot of the equipment that we were using for those competitions. So in that hand, specificity rules the day. You want to be as specific as you can when it comes to the sport because it saves you a lot of headache. However, in this sport, you're not always going to have that luxury. I myself, I haven't been able to train in a strongman facility consistently since I moved here for graduate school. I just don't have the time with the load I have to do in graduate school, or or any research that I may be helping out with, um, any assignments that I might have to do, any papers. I also work, so I have to factor in all of that as well. Financially, I have bills to pay. Don't always have time to work and make that much money, so I have to make sacrifices here and there. And I don't always go out on weekends. I don't always get to train at the luxurious strongman facilities that I'd like to, be they local or 30 minutes out of town. So I have to make do with what I've got. And that's where you want to train that specificity the best way you can. But obviously, you're not going to be able to do that always in this game. So when it comes to training for nationals, what I've had to do is analyze the movements very closely and train a lot of those the best way I can in the gym. Now, the events that we have specifically are going to be the frame carry, the log press, the car deadlift, the yoke run, and Atlas stones. Now obviously, with I do have access to a yoke. I do have access to stones at the weights that I'm going to use in the competition. So those confusing aspects of my training are taken care of. I have a place I can train at for free to use those implements, so I really haven't had to worry about those. Everything else, however, I'm kind of out of luck on that, but it's still a bit irrelevant. So obviously, when you're training for certain events and you don't have access to particular strongman implements, what you want to do is train phases of those implements using conventional methods in the gym. This is easier if you obviously have some passing familiarity with the implements. For example, the way I train the log press, I don't have access to a log. And I believe at nationals we may be using a log that is around 12 inches in diameter. I'm not sure. I know it'll be between 12 and maybe, 14 inches in width. I've used both logs before of those widths, so I'm not worried about that. The log press weight that I have to use is going to be 250 pounds. So to train for a log press event, what I would be doing is a lot of upper back pulling, lots of horizontal pulling. Any horizontal pulls from the floor, like barbell rows, would be a good way to train for that movement, because before you lap the log, what you're essentially doing is horizontally pulling that log and then lapping it. And then when you're in that phase, you're training the bottom phase of a front squat. Okay, and also a bit of a power clean, because you're going to get beneath the log to press it over your head. So you go from barbell row phase 1, paused or dead position front squat phase 2, and 3 would be the actual overhead press phase, or the push press phase, preferably a push. Now, when I train for the log press in the absence of a log, and when I actually do log press, I perform a push press with said log. Find it's easier. I have, in my last training cycle that I did before I won the national qualifier on the 18th of April. Now this is when I didn't know I was going to do that competition. I got talked into it. But in that training cycle, I got the 405 front squat PR that you saw, the video that I uploaded a few months ago. And in that cycle, I also got up to a 315 pound push press. So bearing those in mind, those two movements have always been historically movements since I started competing that have been staples in my programming. I front squat religiously. I use the back squat more as an assistance movement now. My numbers on back squat are still good, low 500s at about 220, 225. So no, nothing crazy, phenomenal, but decent. Since I treat it as an assistance movement now and not a main movement, because I don't powerlift. So for strongman purposes, I've switched to using front squats for my main movement. And now you saw the speed of the 405 video. And when you're training a log press, you don't want to sit in that dead position for too long. You want to train the dead front squat position in the event that you have to, but that's just the worst case scenario type of training. My front squats are in and out of the hole usually is how I mostly train them, and then maybe I'll back down, cut the weight in half, and do pause sets, which also lets me train for stones. After I lap them, I have to stand up with those heavier loads. Now, because you want that hip drive and that reactivity out of the bottom of the hole, so still training back squats helps with your log press. If you're a good squatter, you'll be able to lap and clean logs relatively easy because you have that hip drive and that power. You're the leg strength that you'll need to get the log over your head. But really, it's much more than just expecting to. You can't just overhead press and expect to have a solid log press. You can't just bench a lot and expect to have a pretty good log press on competition day. You know, there's numerous phases of the movement, and I have been able to log press more in competition than people who bench way more than me. You know, I hate benching. You know, that's why you never see me upload any bench videos. It's because I think benching is stupid. You know, it's America's favorite lift for a reason. It's boring. It's easy. But that's another topic for another time. But still, as far as assistance goes, bench press is also another assistance movement that I've been using, secondary to dips. Now, you guys have seen my dip videos as well. If you look through my upload history, my PRs include close to a 500-pound total system weight dip, and system weight's going to mean the amount of weight that you have on a belt plus the actual weight of your body. So at the time that I had my 481-pound dip, which you'll see in the video, I weighed close to 230 pounds, and I had about 250, maybe a bit more, I don't remember exactly, pounds attached to my body. I'll have to look at specifics later after I upload this video. But other than that, you know, most of my assistance has for this phase has been using bench press. Getting mid to high 300s, you know, nothing spectacular. Don't really care about hitting 4 plates right now. I know I can. I just don't really care about it. Maybe sometime in the future. It's just really not that important to me. But back to the events. So for the frame carry, I've been doing a lot of trap bar pulls. That's more specific, I feel, than just training deadlifts. I still do train deadlifts. I have been training deadlifts in this phase that I've written out this training cycle. But I do feel that working on the most specific form of the movement is going to be best for me on competition day, because when you're carrying a frame, the handles are raised and they're parallel. You're not in that more fixed path of motion kind of that a deadlift can place you in. It's easier. I feel it's easier for me to set my hips when I do a trap bar movement. And the same thing with the car deadlift. Now the car deadlift and the frame, they're similar in that vein, because both the car deadlift and the frame carry, you're basically doing a pull from the floor. And the pull from the floor is going to better resemble a trap bar, right? And obviously I can trap bar deadlift considerably more than I can on a conventional bar. But now for prep in my last competition, we had farmers carries and we had trap bar deadlifts themselves. I actually didn't have access to a trap bar deadlift at the time, you know. So still with the frame carry and the car deadlift, I still have the high level transfer that front squats give when it comes to power and reactivity out of the bottom. That hip drive and that power, I'm very good with that. You saw that in the 405 FS video, front squat video. And mainly it's just at this point keep doing what I'm doing, because the national qualifier that I won on the 18th, it was pretty general. I would say there wasn't anything too over the top, nothing wild, nothing that you wouldn't typically see in any standard strongman competition. You had your yoke, you had your stones, you had your log, you had your pull from the floor, you had your weighted carry, you had your medley. So pretty standard. What I was training at the time coincided perfectly with what the event required. So it didn't require any crazy strict change in programming or planning on my end. But yeah, for the frame and car deadlift, I'm trying out the car deadlift simulation this week. I'll probably upload a video with that and let you know how it goes. And also the hex bar pulls, rack pulls, speed pulls. Speed pulls are important. I've been doing speed pulls with the trap bar. I really want to work on bringing those hips through explosively, with the closest feeling that I can manage to replicate using the equipment that I have access to. So yeah, kind of just to reiterate what I was saying before, specificity. For yoke, doing back squats, lots of planking, lots of core stabilization activity with weight, dumbbells, plates, vests, book bags full of weights and books I don't read, heavy old undergrad college textbooks that I don't use anymore, that are just collecting dust, but they're big. Add a little bit of weight here and there. Heavy, like I'll walk a few miles a day wearing a heavy weighted pack. That forces me to keep my core stable and active and engaged for the entirety of the walk. And I found that transfers pretty well to the yoke as well, because you're in that engaged position, except I use about 1/7 of the weight that I'm going to use for competition day. So I'll walk with about 120 pound bag on my body. Now that's more than half my body weight. I'm 227 at the time of recording this video, and I find that helps as well. Just the extra stabilization. It's more weight, but it's been pretty beneficial for me. I'm not gonna walk for 5 miles or so with a 700 pound yoke on my back. No, why would I? Even if I could, why? That sounds like hell waiting to happen. But it still just gets me used to moving with a heavy load on my back, and it lets me fatigue my core for a considerable amount of time. So it's just getting out there, being a bit innovative with my training methods. Now, obviously with stones, I have access to stones. I just work on tech. I don't do a whole bunch of heavy stone lifting. I don't really see the need to. I PR'd on stones in my last competition, and I'd never even touched a 325 pound stone before that competition. I hadn't even loaded a 300 pound stone before, because at that point, when I was training stones in the past, I partially stressed out my bicep in training. So, I mean, just things to consider. But what I mainly do for stones, obviously, again, the front squats. Y'all know I have a pretty big front squat. Doing front squats with pauses, because when you're lapping the stone, when you have the stone lapped, and you're sitting with 300 or something pound stone just lapped in your lap, and then you have to explode up and extend it. It's not really easy, sitting in that dead front squat position with 325 pounds. That's not really that far away from my max weight, that I can handle on front squats. So you want to train that dead position. You can train it submaximally. You just want to get used to the feeling. And I do lots of glute work as well, lots of bridging, lots of isolation if I can do it. That definitely helps with the overall power that I can generate out of the bottom as well. But yeah, again, this is the big binder, the big diabolical book of training programs. I have a legend here. And pages are starting to tear out. It contains a lot of specifics that I've been doing. I have a legend here, a list of all the exercises that I've been doing. I use lots of abbreviations and acronyms. It just helps me remember a few things in case I get caught up, in case I get tongue-tied. It usually doesn't happen. I kind of just made the legend because I was bored one day on the job, and I just figured, I'll just write this out because, why not? But, good little gauge. I recommend it. I like keeping training journals. It keeps me on track. And I can look back at it. It's like a chronological history. It's just all in order. I can look at it. I can see what worked at what point in my training. And if I remember being stuck at a certain point, if I get stuck at a point again, I have this information and this knowledge on myself and on how I trained in the past to draw upon. So, if you don't do it now, definitely keep yourself a good training log. Other than that, that's all I really had for you guys. If you donated to the fundraiser to help me get to nationals, I appreciate you. Definitely. Most of the people who donated are a few people who I've met since I've just moved to Tampa. So, if you believe in me, if you believe in what I'm trying to achieve, if you think I can do it, if you think I can win a big gold belt, for doing strongman, I definitely appreciate the support. I'm not holding a knife to anybody's throat and making anybody give me donations. I'm not that kind of guy. If you do it, you do it. You don't, I'll make sure I go to nationals anyway. And I'll bring back the gold belt if I can, and I won't let you touch it. All right. Y'all have a good night. This is Joe signing out from Tampa, Florida. Peace.